Mr. Kealoha?
Sorry, I didn't bring my glasses. I never do. Aloha, Mr. McClaren.
Aloha.
Thank you for being here. I did want to clarify some things I didn't understand, and hopefully it'll make it easier for others who don't understand to have a better opinion about this permit. Okay, we talked earlier, I believe it was Ms. Aluli, about the $2.5 million amount for each of the two observatories that were, terminating their lease. And you talked about how they came up with that amount with an assessment, and a third party from the UH side did an assessment as well. And I understand there was no decommissioning date set until 2010, is that right? For any of the observatories?
The only firm date at the moment is for Caltech Submillimeter Observatory, where they've already started the process. The university has committed to decommission 3 telescopes by the time that TMT is operational. And then the third aspect is that in the decommissioning plan back from 2010, yes, 2010, we foresee the decommissioning of 4 telescopes, at least 4 telescopes would not extend beyond 2033.
Maybe you can help me understand how they can come up with an assessed amount.
Oh, you mean the 2.5 million?
Any amount from that amount or future amounts of decommissioning.
Okay, the way that was done, there are firms that do demolition removal work as their business, several of them in the state, and they were given the drawings and specifications of these facilities. They were given a copy of the decommissioning plan and the sublease requirements and so on, and they were asked for an estimate of what it would cost to do what was required.
Okay. Now, for the estimate and assessment, did these assessments have a projected decommission date included in their assessment? Was there a date that they knew that this price would need to be?
Yeah, I understand. Their assumption was that they would be doing it within the next few years. So they said this is what it would cost us to do it soon. If that's the thrust of your question, yeah.
Is every telescope required to have a decommissioning plan?
Eventually, yes. I mean, at the point that they're approaching decommissioning, yes, they do. But they don't have to have it now.
And they're decommissioning the point at which they will need to do this is when each telescope?
You're asking how much in advance? I mean,
yeah, you said at a point they would be in the future they would be required to have that. What's that point and time?
Well, it isn't quite phrased that way. It's phrased that they should start the process something like 5 years ahead of the intended date of being all gone. That's basically a suggestion in the plan. They should start about that far ahead.
And that sounds like it depends greatly on the lease expiration date? Or no? What date does that 5 years start from?
Well, certainly if you're 5 years away from your sublease date, then it's time to start. And you don't have any assurance, or they don't expect to go beyond the end of the sublease, then you need to start work on the decommissioning plan, yeah.
And this is
later than that.
And this decommissioning process has only been, and correct me if I'm wrong, has it only been around since 2009 or 10?
It's only been around in this level of detail. All of the subleases had requirements to what essentially decommission at the end of the sublease, or when they ceased operation, whichever came sooner. But there wasn't any great detail about what that would entail or the process. And that was a criticism. They said, yeah. And so to address that criticism in the comprehensive management plan, they generated this decommissioning plan, which does spell out in considerable detail what observatories are expected to do. I mean, that's the process that's to be followed.
Thank you. So in 1968, I believe that's the correct date of the first telescope going up, were they required to have a decommissioning plan from that point?
Well, in 1968, the only document that existed of that type was the actual general lease between the state and the university, and that requires the university to remove any improvements, they call them, right, when the lease is done. Now, I think there actually is a provision that the land board can allow some abandonment in place in the terms of that 1968 lease. They can. They don't have to. My judgment is that probably today they wouldn't do that.
So they were expected to have a decommissioning plan, is that correct? The 1968 telescope?
No, they were simply expected to decommission.
Oh, okay, I see. I see. So there was no plan. The understanding was when the
lease... There was no explicit reference to a plan, no.
So the understanding is and was that when the lease ended, they would decommission, is that correct?
That's correct.
Have they decommissioned the first telescope? From 1968. Is it the Hoku Kea?
I think the answer there is no. There's been no decommissioning in the sense that it is currently understood in the plan, in that it's the no longer use of the site.
Who holds that stipulation to be decommissioned accountable?
Ultimately, the university, because we're the leaseholder.
Would you say the university is in default of that legal agreement?
No.
And why not? I'd like to understand.
Because it's not 2033 yet.
Okay. So 1968 is supposed to expire in 2033.
Yeah.
Okay.
The lease requires the decommissioning, unless there's some extension, the lease requires decommissioning of whatever the university has put up there or allowed to be put up there.
I got it. Thank you.
By the end of the lease.
The other two that opted out on their lease, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, did you say that the university decided to repurpose them?
Not quite. The university decided to allow the use to continue. So really the purpose hasn't changed, but the entities carrying out that purpose have changed. So the use is the same, it's just different operators.
Since there are supposedly only 13 telescopes, which is contended, do you know the dates, the 13 dates for each one?
No.
As the assistant director of the Institute for Astronomy, how did decommissioning become part of your, is it your responsibility?
The primary responsibility of administering the decommissioning plan rests with Office of Mauna Kea Management, and that's at UH Hilo.
And why are you submitting written direct testimony about decommissioning as the Institute for Astronomers Assistant Director?
Okay, that's a good question. I think the main theme that I intended to testify on was actually the material in Chapter 5 of the decommissioning plan, which does deal with what we know at present and project for the choice of which telescopes will continue longer than others and which will be decommissioned. It wasn't my intent to witness to all of these details, but maybe I should have just introduced Chapter 5 rather than the entire document.
Your written direct testimony, I don't know if I can ask this, but I will. Was it your decision, or were you asked to write about certain topics by the University of Hawaii?
I think when the prospective list of witnesses was developed, I was asked to take this one on.
Okay, and does your salary come from the University of Hawaii?
Yes, it does.
So they are your employer? Yeah.
The University of Hawaii is my employer, yes.
I didn't really understand your answer to the question of whether, could you say it again? Whether the UH asked you to specifically write about certain topics. Yes or no?
Yes, they asked me to develop testimony on this topic.
So your employer who pays you, and what if you said no? Did you have that option?
Say again?
What if you said you didn't want to write about that topic? Did you have the option?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think they felt that because I'd been involved in the development, and I had been involved in the decisions that were made in deciding in particular what was in the decommissioning plan. Not so much the governor's stuff, but the decommissioning plan. I worked with the person who was then director of the Institute to decide exactly what we would say there. So I think primarily for that reason, I was asked to present on this topic.
And you feel, testifying under oath, that if you did not want to write about the topic they suggested, that you could, in fact, not write about the topic they suggested?
Yeah, they would have found someone else. No, I don't think they would have kicked me out if I'd said I wasn't going to do
but I think, so you believe that they would have found somebody else. So mahalo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You said decommissioning, part of that process includes what you termed return to even grade.
One of the, that's terminology that's used in some of the subleases. That's where that comes from. And that is one of the allowed endpoints under the terms of a number of the subleases. That's the way it's phrased.
And then he said above ground structures would be removed.
Yeah, I think my understanding that even grade means that at a minimum the above ground structures are gone and you have basically a flat surface left.
Are you suggesting that perhaps, like what Lena Ala's point on the sewage, what do you call it? The underground sewage storage. Are you suggesting that possibly that could be left behind as is?
I think that the term even grade would include that as a possibility, yes. So I think you could say that you would restored it to even grade even if you'd left some things underground.
So it's a possibility.
Okay.
Thank you. And the question about some other document besides, I think Mrs. Aluli asked, is there some kind of document outside of the two documents, meaning the sublease and the operational, is it plan? Is that the right term for it?
The name changes depending on the facility, but if you're talking about the recent ones with TMT and UCURT and JCMT, they're called scientific cooperation agreements.
Okay, so, but these two documents are the only, are they the only documents that require decommissioning?
Oh, the sublease requires the decommissioning. The SCA does not. That doesn't deal with that part of it.
So the sublease is the only document legally requiring telescopes to decommission?
Yes.
How would that document that's legally binding hold accountable the corporations for decommissioning? How can they guarantee it?
How can it guarantee it?
Yeah. Yes.
You're saying, how does the existence of a sublease with a decommissioning requirement in it guarantee it?
Yeah. How is it held accountable? Suppose in the case that a corporation or a telescope decides not to fulfill it.
Well, it's a contract. I mean, it's a legal agreement between the university on one hand and the sublessee on the other. So, I mean, to that extent, that's the only guarantee. You have that. The parties have made that agreement, and they've recorded it in the sublease. So
the Institute for Astronomy wouldn't be party to that accountability, holding the telescope accountable or UH accountable.
In the case of the sublease situations, then the university would hold the sublessee accountable for discharging that responsibility.
An Institute for Astronomy probably, would have nothing to do with holding accountable any entity to fulfill the decommissioning?
Not the Institute itself, no.
Thank you. Wait just a second. In concern of the UCURT telescope complex, that's it. And the Caldwell, is that right? Oh, Maxwell.
Oh, okay.
Telescope. Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Telescope complex.
Right.
Who requires these two entities to contribute to this decommissioning purpose? The funds of $2.5 million.
One of the in the sublease terms for those facilities, the agreement that the university had with the British Science Agency, there were a number of ways things could end. And one of those was that the university had an option to acquire the ownership of the facility, basically take it over. Okay. But that was, and so the university decided to exercise that option or that endpoint, but a condition of it was that we would then have the ultimate decommissioning responsibility, and in return for accepting that responsibility, we would require them to pay what we expected it was going to cost, because otherwise they would have been required to do it.
And now that, and you claim and you stated that UH has taken over operation or making use of those two observatories. Is that right?
Not operations, ownership.
But making use, did you say, or no?
So I didn't hear you.
Did you say that the UH was making use, like they're using these two telescopes practically?
We are participating in their use, and that the details of that are described in the scientific cooperation agreement. So we're along with the other entities, we're making use of those telescopes.
And is the set date for expiration or I guess, is the lease date that was set to expire with the original leaseholders the same for UH and these two telescopes?
Well, there is no lease document anymore in connection with those, right? Because the university owns them. In that respect, they're like the 2.2 meter or Hoku Kea, the university property.
Do these two plus the 1.3, these three telescopes have no decommissioning plans and dates?
No, some of them do. they'll, if we're talking about still Ukert,
Maxwell,
Maxwell,
and now the Hokukea. When are they set to?
All of those are mentioned in one or other of the decommissioning plans or commitments that I've talked about. First of all, in the decommissioning plan itself, Chapter 5, there's a projection, a commitment basically that Ukert will not continue beyond 2033, no matter what happens with the sublease, right? There's also, and in the same boat, there's VLBA, CSO, and one or other of JCMT and the submillimeter array. So Ukert and JCMT are mentioned in the decommissioning plan. Then we come to the governor's plan, and the governor wants the university to decommission things effectively earlier than 2033, at least some things, right? 3 in number. And so what happened then is CSO is already a given, right? Ukert effectively, we've put it among the 3, Ukert is effectively advanced. Instead of saying, well, it's not going to go beyond 2033, now we're saying it's not going to go beyond TMT starting up. Okay. So it's the same telescope, it's just that there's been an advancement of that timeline on that one in order to respond positively to the governor. Now, to find the third one, I mean, since we expect TMT to be, I mean, we can't go up to 2033 anymore to satisfy the governor's requirement, and we can't kick somebody out who has a sublease. The only facilities that could be considered for meeting the governor's requirements are ones that the university owns. We can't, otherwise, unless somebody spontaneously says, geez, I guess we're going to shut down, then we're left with the ones that the university owns, and unfortunately, as a lot of us feel, Hokukea is the one that was named, at least the current intention, and that's why that ended up that way. If you read the decommissioning plan, you'll see that Hokukea was intended to continue.
I'm concerned about the 3 because I heard you say earlier that the other telescopes are decommissioning dates are largely influenced by their lease or agency to stop the lease early.
That's right.
And the other 3, are they legally binded to decommission? Is that the right word? Yeah. Are they legally binded to decommission? Because you said it was a commitment. Is this a commitment to decommission at a whatever time it was suggested? Is this a legally binding commitment?
The 3 that in connection with the governor's request, is that what you're asking about?
No, the 3 that are under, that the 2 leases have been terminated, and the third one, the UH, is Hokukea. Those 3 telescopes, are they legally binded to decommission by contract?
I wouldn't. Depends on your definition. I think the most binding aspect of it is the letter that the most binding aspect of the university's response to the governor's request is the letter that President Lassner sent to the land board chair Case. And that I included as an exhibit with my testimony, right? And that doesn't name them. It just simply says that the university is committed to decommission 3. Doesn't say which ones, but it does say 3. So you asked about legally binding, and that's the thing I would point to as currently being the most legally binding thing in connection with the governor's request.
So it's a declaration of intent, basically. It's not a contract.
It is what it is.
Okay, got it.
It speaks for itself.
It concerns me because it seems like you suggested earlier that the decommissioning plan was promulgated from contention of genuine decommissioning, and that these three, and I want to confirm again, you stated they do not have an official contract binding them to decommissioning. Is that right?
I'd say there's no binding contract. I mean, that's
well, the other leases seem to have that built in the lease.
The leases
and that's
require decommissioning.
Yes.
That's a binding contract.
Yes. These three do not have a binding contract. Is that right?
These three. Okay.
The three, the U-Kirk,
okay,
the Maxwell, and I don't know if that's the right term, and the Hokukea.
Not in the same sense as the sublease. As I said, I think the most legally defining thing is at this point is the president's letter,
which is a suggestion, right? The governor's letter, right?
No, the president's letter to the land board chair, which was a response to the governor's request. Okay. The decommissioning plan that was adopted in 2010, is that right? Is that in violation? The three telescopes without a lease, are they in violation of this plan for decommissioning? No.
But you said that they are not binded legally to decommission. Is that suggesting?
If you don't mind, we'll take a 10-minute recess because we need a little bit of a break right now. And do you think maybe we can wrap up in about 10 minutes after that?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Contested case hearing for the 30-meter telescope project. A proceeding for the State of Hawaii, DLNR, Board of Land and Natural Resources.
Dr. McClaren? Dr. McClaren? Talking to Mr. Vicente. He would be on my to-call list for history. I'm not kidding. He knows so much. Really impressive. Yeah. Okay, folks. Mr. Kealoha, hang on for a second. We'll get our witness squared away. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for the break. And Dr. McClaren, I'd like to remind you that the testimony you're about to give will continue under the oath you took earlier.
Understood.
To tell the truth. All right, thank you very much. Mr. Kealoha, your continued cross-examination, please.
Hello again, Mr. McClaren. So we were talking about the three telescopes, the Hokukea, the U-Kirk, and what do you call the Maxwell one?
JCMT.
JCMT. The other 10 have a process set up, that seems to apply to either their agency to opt out of the lease or the expiration of the lease in regards to decommissioning. Now, these three are not part of that scenario. So I'm concerned that there is any liability for decommissioning of these three telescopes. Who is liable for the decommissioning of these telescopes, if anyone?
All three of those are now the responsibility of UH.
Is there a legal liability that they have to observe for the decommissioning of these three telescopes?
I'm reluctant to answer what are called legal questions. I'll just say that the terms of the university's lease from the state has requirements in connection with removing the facilities at the end of the lease.
But there is no lease for these three, is that correct?
Oh, the end of the master lease.
Okay, and when does that expire?
2033.
in that master lease, is it specifically stated that they must be decommissioned?
It's stated that the improvements, as they are called, right, have to be removed.
Does the University of Hawaii, to the best of your knowledge, intend to allow that lease to expire without advocating extension?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Does the University of Hawaii intend to allow that master lease to expire without advocating for extension?
No.
They intend to extend, then. Is that correct?
The university intends to request what's effectively an extension, yes.
Okay. Who is held liable in the case of these 3 telescopes if they were not decommissioned at the end of the lease and the lease was not extended?
Check to the form of the question, Your Honor. I think he's asking for a legal conclusion. Maybe it can be reworded.
Are you asking for this witness's understanding, or you're asking for...
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm asking for the understanding.
What is your understanding about...
Yeah, as testifying for decommissioning, your, I guess, personal and professional understanding, but not legal conclusion, of who would be held liable if these 3 telescopes, the specific 3 we're talking about, were not decommissioned at the end of the master lease.
The university.
Is this also true if perhaps there was a toxic spill, the university would be held liable? Your personal opinion?
It would depend on the details.
Are there very large amount of scenarios that depend on, or is there 1 or 2 or 3?
Well, it would depend on the nature of the spill and where it occurred and why, so on.
A toxic spill inside that leaked outside of the telescope as well. Who would be held liable for that, for these 3 especially?
I think the university would be expected to answer questions about it and ensure that any kind of event like that was dealt with appropriately, but our understanding with our agreement with the observatories is that they would be ultimately they would be responsible for cleanup of things that occurred in the course of their operation.
Even on the outside of the telescope? Not just the inside?
Yeah, even if it were outside, if it was part of their activity, yes.
Okay, I had heard something else, so I wanted to confirm that.
Yeah.
And you said your understanding was such. Does this mean the UH has communicated that they understand their liability?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So there's no confusion about whether the spill is inside or outside the telescope as to who's liable?
No confusion.
If it was just inside, who would be held liable?
If it was inside?
Yes.
Almost certainly the owner of that facility.
The sublease C.
If there were a sublease, yes.
Yes. And outside would also be the subleasee, if there were a subleasee? Lease, is that the right word? Subleaser?
If it occurred on the subleased area, yes, I think so.
Has there ever been confusion before, to the best of your knowledge, about these liabilities, inside and outside catastrophes?
No, not to my knowledge.
There was questions about who polices the Pico or the summit area of the Mauna and what laws apply. That is why I ask. So, what police entity has jurisdiction of the summit area, to the best of your knowledge?
You'd have to be more specific by what you mean by the summit area. I mean,
the area the telescopes are in.
Oh, okay. Well, the university has the lease, and then the various entities have subleases. So You're talking about, I guess I've lost the thread of the question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What police entity
What police entity? I'm sorry, I missed
has
that part.
jurisdiction in the area of the telescopes? Like whether it's
Again,
sheriffs, state police.
this is not my area of expertise, so, but my understanding is that the police entities involved there is the Island of Hawaii Police Department, right, for certain things, and there is the DOCARE, the DLNR's police arm for other things. But those are the only, I mean, there are other entities as well, right, depending on the nature of what you're talking about. But those are, I would say, the two primary entities that have police-type responsibility.
Are you aware of any confusion or discrepancies of jurisdiction in the past that has been brought to your attention as far as police jurisdictions in the summit region of the telescopes?
I'm aware that in the past there have been some questions about jurisdiction, yes.
And is there still difficulty in that area currently, depending on the situation?
I'm not aware of any current difficulty.
Why is there, and if you don't have, I'm not sure if this is part of your scope, but you mentioned a time restraint for decommissioning of 18 months, I think you said. Is that right? For certain telescopes?
I don't recall the 18-month figure. I just simply don't remember where that came up.
Okay, maybe I didn't. Do you recall any time restraint for decommissioning of telescopes?
Time restraint? You mean? I think the answer is no. I don't. Yeah.
There's no time restraint. I mean, are there any time restraints for when a? Maybe I'm not asking it right. I think, did you mention earlier there were constrictions on time for decommissioning? Am I wrong about that?
The restrictions, the restrictions on time that I testified before are the ones that are in the subleases, right? And the commitments that the university made in response to the governor's 10-point plan. Maybe not.
So there's no point where the time it took to decommission, the possible time it will take to decommission a telescope would come to a certain point where you've reached a time limit to decommission, and you've failed or you've succeeded. And is there such a scenario as that?
Yes, there's one aspect that just occurred to me. I haven't mentioned it till now. That is, if a facility became inoperative for some period of time and that it wasn't being used for the intended purpose, then we would expect them to begin the decommissioning process. In other words, we would not permit a facility to stay idle, basically, and just sit there not doing anything.
So would a facility that began the decommissioning process have a time limit to decommission?
I have never seen a time limit of the type that you seem to be referring to.
Yeah, because I might have heard wrong, that's why I'm asking. Thank you.
Okay.
Are you aware that the Mauna is held supremely sacred by some Kanaka?
Yes.
Are you aware that also non-Kanaka consider the Mauna sacred to some extent?
Sorry, say that again?
Are you also aware that non-Kanaka, non-Hawaiians, also
yes. Mm-hmm.
consider,
yes.
So not just Hawaiians, or not just Kanaka, consider the Mauna sacred, is that correct?
I wasn't aware of that specific fact, no.
Okay, wait. I just want to make it clear. So you're not aware that non-Kanaka, at least some non-Kanaka, consider the summit sacred?
I'm aware that some Kanaka consider the mountain sacred. Is that?
Yes, you answered that. But in concerns of non-Kanaka,
Oh, I'm sorry.
are you aware that some non-Kanaka also consider the Mauna supremely sacred?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm not surprised, but I know I'm not aware of a particular person, so I'd have to say no.
It says in your curriculum vitae that you were originally a Canadian citizen, correct?
I'm still a Canadian citizen.
And you're still a Canadian citizen. And you've become naturalized U.S.
No.
citizen? Are you a U.S. citizen? Are you a U.S. citizen?
No.
Oh. Would you have come to live in Hawaii were it not for the telescope industry?
Probably not.
Would it be in your best interest and job security? I know you're probably going to retire soon, but in general, as job security, to ensure that the observatory industrial complex were maintained?
I'm going to object to the characterization in the question.
I like the term too. but yes, as a characterization, or the observatory industry were maintained, let's just say that. Would it be in your best interest if the observatory industry were maintained?
I'm not sure it would be in my best. I don't think I have any interest in it, but it would be my hope that it would continue.
But your career is within the, what is the correct term if not observatory industry?
What's that?
What is the correct term that you would use for observatory industry?
Oh, okay.
Because I don't want to offend you.
Yeah, okay. I don't know, maybe research establishment, something like that.
Okay, sure, I can use that for now. So would it be in your best interest, being that you moved here for your career, that is in the research category, would it be in your best interest to maintain this research institution?
Yes.
Would it also not be in your best interest to advocate against the complete decommissioning of all observatories?
Yes, it would.
Is there any plan for the complete decommissioning of the Mauna Summit?
No plan for that, no.
Does the research industry intend to enforce its presence on the Mauna indefinitely?
I wouldn't say enforce. I think that...
Advocate.
Yes, advocate is okay.
Are there any sacred places in Canada that are natural?
Any which?
Any sacred places in Canada that you consider natural?
That I personally consider natural.
Sorry. Any natural sacred places in Canada, in your best estimation?
There are places that I have a very strong appreciation for. I personally, I wouldn't say that they rise to the level of sacred, but I have a very strong appreciation for certain places in Canada, yes.
Is there anything in particular that you could share with us that you consider sacred?
Any particular?
That you would be comfortable sharing with us that you consider sacred?
Are we still with places in Canada, or are we in general?
In general, sir.
And is it location, or?
No, it's up to you. It's all yours. The universe.
Consider sacred. I consider human life pretty sacred. I mean, I don't know, that's within the realm of what you're asking.
Absolutely, thank you. And are you familiar with the term ola naivi?
No, but maybe if you tell me what it is.
It means our bones live. And I thank you very much for your time.